Good morning, hello, and welcome, my fellow seekers of truth, meaning, and your way in this world. My name is Pastor Jason, and I am here today to introduce you to Live Positive Ministries, give you a little background on who we are, what we're about, and why we hope you care to know more about us and follow us here in the future. Live Positive Ministries is a non-denominational ministry that believes that religion and God are not inextricably intertwined, meaning you do not need one in order to believe in the other. We are not against or necessarily endorse any one particular religion or spiritual theory, so long as the core belief of that is the betterment of our fellow man, love, acceptance for everyone, and a respectful understanding that one's spirituality and path to God and enlightenment and whatever comes after this life is a very personal thing, something meant to be discussed, something meant to be explored, something meant to be shared, and something that is an ever-evolving situation for all people. The core goals of our ministry, if you choose to become a part of it and share in this experiment of sorts with us, is to help people find their own relationship with their Creator, whoever, however, and whatever that may be to them. And what we mean by that is, because religion is such or even just not necessarily religion. We're going to often say the word religion because that's how we view, most people view spirituality, most people view a relationship with God. But whatever belief system we choose in our lives, or is chosen for us upon birth, it will evolve, it will grow, and that's okay. There is no one way to have a relationship with God. Many faiths, many beliefs will say there is only one way, but there isn't. And that's what we're here to help you understand. And even what God is different to every single person. You will hear me when I speak of God. I will say Him and He and the Father, and relate to God in the traditional biblical sense of what we typically know the word God to be, because I am a product of that time, right? I am a product of a time where God was always viewed as the male form, masculine form, and what have you. But the reality of it is God is none of that. God is just God. God is something that is beyond our understanding. Faith, spirituality, religion is our means to try to find God and what God means. And throughout our lives and throughout your life, you will come to grow and evolve the ways that you view God. So understand, my ways of expressing God, my ways of speaking about God will be as God is to me, as I have throughout my whole life viewed and seen God. But do understand, I do recognize God is neither he, she. God is just God. Our second core goal within our ministry is to help people understand that religion is neither good nor bad. It's whatever you make of it. There is no single right way to worship God. The problem that we often have, because history will show us, and even modern day history, religion can be the pathway to some horrific things, but it is not the religion itself that has created these horrors. It is man's improper use of religion. It's man's bastardization of beliefs that causes these things to happen. So don't blame God, don't blame religion, blame the people that inappropriately and improperly worship God. A perfect example of this is back during the days of the U.S.'s war with Iraq and going into Afghanistan, and I'm neither condoning nor condemning any of that. That's not my place to judge. But one thing that you would see is these jihadists who would cut people's heads off in the name of Allah and in the name of God, and they would enact out the vengeance in defense of God. For me, that's an excessively arrogant viewpoint to do such things, because God does not need our help to do these horrible things. God is not so weak that he needs a human to go out and carry out such a thing in his name. That is a very human action. That is a very a bastardization of the belief system, because the Muslim faith is one of peace and love. But unfortunately, because of these extremists, many people don't see that. They think it is of one as very mean, very violent, and in reality, no, it's these people that are so arrogant and so full of themselves and have become so twisted in their ideology that they think they need to go and do what they view as God's work. God does not need our help to do such things. If God wants someone removed from this earth, they will be removed in any millions of ways that God himself could do it. God does not need you to go out there and kill someone in his name and on his behalf. It just doesn't need to happen. So when you see these things happen and you say, wow, religion is bad. No, it's the person that is bad. It's not the religion. It's the person and the people who improperly and arrogantly go forth and or selfishly go forth and use religion in the name of God to gain power, to enact and enforce their particular belief system. Religion is not something to be enforced. Religion is not something to be shoved down someone's throat forcefully. It's a journey. It's a spiritual journey to find God, and as such, it is something for all of us to discuss, because belief systems evolve. And mine, I'm 52 years old, and over my 52 years of having grown up in the church and in the Lutheran faith, having taught Bible school, having taught Sunday school, having been the president of our church's youth group when I was a kid, having read the Bible cover to cover many times, having read the Quran, having read the Book of Mormon, having really read about Taoism and the Buddhist belief systems, and I'm fairly well versed in the generalities of all faiths, all major faiths and beliefs. And at their core, there's love. At their core, there's acceptance. At their core, there is guidance on how to live a better life. And also within each, there is room for interpretation for mankind to do some pretty horrible things. And that is man, that is not God. So don't blame God for these things. So, we hope to take you on a journey to find your faith, to find your path, and to find your way to God as it best fits your life and your belief system, and to know that you can accept God. You don't necessarily have to accept a particular religion, which kind of goes into our next core goal. And some of this is a bit repetitive, but it is really the core of our belief system. But it's to help you understand that all religions are simply maps or paths to finding God and your personal meaning in life. There is no right or wrong way to do this. There is only the way that is right for you. Follow one of these paths, pull out one of these maps and take a look at it, or strike out and forge your own path. Create your own way to God, so long as you start that journey, so long as you take the first step on that path and start walking towards God. That's all that matters. And on that journey, you're going to find obstacles. You're going to find things that make you question. Things are going to happen in your life that make you say, golly, if there's a God that loves me, why did God let this happen to me? Why did God have this happen to someone else? Or you're going to hear someone, you start reading, like when I started to read the Quran, And I also pulled out a book called Islam for Dummies. It was a very good book. And I started reading it, and at one point I was like, my goodness, I'm a Muslim. I read so many things in this that just made sense, and it was just so beautiful and loving and wonderful. I mean, I was like, wow, I really, really buy into a lot of what this particular religion has to say. Really, really beautiful. But then I came across some things, not so much. I found it very hard to believe or accept, some of these additional things. And you're going to run into that as well. That doesn't automatically disqualify that faith, or it doesn't disqualify faith or religion in general. It just gives you something to ponder. It gives you something to think about. You look at those areas that you challenge. You see if you can reconcile them into your belief system in some way. And if you can't, you say, well, okay, you know what? I really, really like this part of it. So because that made me feel good, because it's something I do think could really be meaningful, let's go with that. Let's go with it. And then move on to something else. Because each and every one of us can, in our own way, become, or create, I should say, our own religion, because it's so personal. If you look at every single faith, every single religion out there, let's say a Catholic, does every Catholic follow their faith 100%? By the book? No, they don't. It's almost impossible to do that. Even priests often cannot follow that faith. We have free will. God gave us free will. We have an adventurous spirit that was given to us by God. We're going to wander. And the reality of it is, you're going to look at any belief system, any faith, and there's just things that aren't going to fit into your life. They aren't going to fit into the fact that you are human and you are frail and you will make mistakes, and it might be something that just doesn't work. And when you're faced with that, and oftentimes the idea that if you make these mistakes, you're going to burn in hell, who wants to accept that into their lives and accept, my goodness, if I show myself to be human and make mistakes, I'm condemned to a fiery pit of suffering for all of eternity? Nobody wants to believe that. I don't believe that. And we will get into that. Matter of fact, I do have a blog. It's called livepositiveministries.blogspot.com. And I will constantly put up my, a basic script about what each podcast is. So you can go back and read some of the things we discussed. Obviously, the podcast is more involved. The blog is just kind of a basic idea of what we've talked about on the podcast. But I will try to keep up on that. So again, that is livepositiveministries.blogspot.com. And I would appreciate you stopping by. But the reality of it is, nobody follows their faith without fault and 100%. We all pick and choose the parts that fit us and the parts that don't. And every time you do that, in your own way, you're creating your own version of your faith. And that's okay. Okay, it really is. Sorry about that. I had an alarm go off on my phone. There's nothing wrong with that. And even the faith, like for me, I am ordained. I am pastor or reverend, whatever you want to call a minister. But even those titles are imposed by man. Okay? It's a title given by another human being, another group, another organization that says, okay, well, we recognize you as being someone that is qualified to do these things. What qualifies you? Every one of us can be a minister. Every one of us can be a pastor. If we want to go out and help guide people towards an ideology, guide people towards trying to find their God, and doing so in a respectful way, doing so with a pure heart, knowing that we may be wrong, we may be right, and being open with people. And we say, we do not know these things. These are what we think is correct. These are the ideas that we believe will help us find God. but at the same time, hear them and make your own choice, your own path, um, with the hope that we're right, in the sense that God will be okay with this. Um, I have a friend, an old friend, who is very by the Bible, and often tells me he fears for my well-being, my soul, because my viewpoints don't adhere strictly to, or even in many ways to, the Bible. Uh, and I hope he's wrong. But our ministry believes that what's most important is finding the relationship with God, trying to live as best we can a godly life with the understanding that we are human. We have been blessed with free will and gifted free will by God. And we're going to make mistakes. We're not going to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. Anyone that tells you you must be perfect is in of themselves imperfect. And it's not our place to judge. Only God can judge. We can simply discuss, give opinions, thoughts, ideas, and hope to guide each other down the right path. Another number 4 in our core goals is to be part of the solution in this world and not part of the problem. Doing so by acting in ways that heal the divisions in this world through patience, understanding, acceptance, refocusing of what really matters in life, putting our faith in our families, putting our faith in one another, and putting our faith in our Creator. And to dive a little deeper into that, so much of the division in this world today, and so much of what you see on TV, you hear from politicians, you hear from the news, you hear from celebrities, you have to know is simply not reality. It's a very distorted version of reality that is fed through a lens of profit. It's fed through a lens of selfishness and greed. And the reality of it is, the world, yes, there is darkness in this world. There are monsters in this world that look, and they look just like you and me. There is evil within this world, but it's not the predominant thing within this world. When you go through your day-to-day, how much of that evil do you actually see? How much of that meanness do you actually see? Most people you encounter are living this life just like you are, want nothing but the best for themselves, and wish you no harm as well. And when you see the news, for instance, you have to understand there's very little truth within the news. This is not a political one way or the other. This goes for the news, whether it comes from the right, it comes from the left. I don't believe there really is any center news these days, because it's about profit. You're running a news cycle 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's only so much to talk about in life. And unfortunately, one of the frailties of humanity is the old media saying of if it bleeds, it leads, is true. We drive by the car accident, we have to slow down and look at it. We know what's sitting there. A car that's been badly damaged, possibly another human being that's either dead or seriously injured. Us stopping and looking at that accident does not help in any way. If anything, it endangers the people behind us. It doesn't add anything beneficial to the situation, but we do it anyway. So many of us just have to look. We have to take a look at the carnage that's there. Or back in the days of the beheadings that were being put out, there's so many people that just had to watch those. Why would you want to watch such a horrible suffering? Why would you want to watch somebody go through something just so terrible? We know that's out there, right? But the reality of it is, that's not life. That's not the majority of life. There's so much good out there. There's so much wonderful out there. There's so many good people out there. So the media, the news, has no way to profit from the good feelings and the good things. They care about profit. They have their own agendas, And those agendas do not care about you or me. They just simply don't. It doesn't mean you ignore, you listen to all of it, but you don't just blindly accept what they say. You question absolutely everything. You believe what has real proof to it, not, if you really are honest with yourself, and all media does this, both sides of this argument, they clearly color things in such a way to fit a certain narrative, and we all fall into that narrative. And then you look at artists, whether it be musicians, actors, athletes. It's not to say that these people are all bad. It's not. They're not. And many of them have come from very bad situations and made something of their life through their talents. But the reality of it is, because they're famous or because they're wealthy, does not make them better than you, does not make them smarter than you, does not make their opinions more informed than yours. Quite honestly, it's very often the opposite. They live in a bubble. They live in a world surrounded by people who know they have a lot of money and know that they have a lot to gain by staying and remaining on their good side. They're people that tell them everything they want to hear. Everything that they say is genius and amazing. It leads them, even people who may have started out as good, rational, sane people, into believing that they are something more. There's something better. There's something above. There's something next level. And they're not. They are no different than you and I, and quite often they're very faulted. Just like you and I. We have many faults. A lot of them have drug addictions. A lot of them have depression issues. You see this very, very often. And they come and try to, push out these narratives that maybe on the surface sound good. Or you may sound like something that yeah, okay, that makes sense, on the surface. But often leads to divisions. It often leads to creating these tribes that separate us and divide us. And the reality of it is there's one tribe. It's the human tribe. I highly recommend travel. I highly recommend going out if there is a group of people that you aren't particularly comfortable with, and finding every way you can to be around those people and their culture. And you will find people are people. When you travel the world, you will find people are people. Someone looks different than you, has a different culture, it doesn't mean they don't like or respect you. As a matter of fact, oftentimes they just are so excited to share their culture with you and let you share yours with them. They want to learn about you and you can learn from them. The reality of, and I'll get into another podcast, but most of the misunderstandings we have these days, let's take racism for instance, is racism of the past was quite different from racism of the present. Okay, racism of the past was largely a racism of ignorance, in that white people, let's take for instance when it came to black people or Indians or even Asians or Hispanic, most white people could go their entire lives without seeing anyone else that wasn't white. And so most of their understanding of these other ethnicities were from stereotypes that they had heard, things other people have told them, but they had no real exposure. And so you came to beliefs that were kind of racist or very racist in some cases, but it was just because you didn't know any better. You had no experience. You were going by what you were told. And the racism of today, while much less, and don't let people make you believe that racism is rampant in the world today. Racism from when I was a kid to today is drastically reduced, and it's gotten so much better. I myself am in a mixed marriage. However, the racism of today is darker in that it's a racism of choice. The world is much more integrated these days. There is much more education to where we understand that just because someone looks different, it doesn't make them any different. They're just it's all cosmetic. Yes, there are cultural differences, and we can often, find a lot to learn in these different cultural things and learn to appreciate these differences. But it's two very different types of racism. Well, this goes, what I'm about to say for everything, is integration, spending more time around people who are different from you, getting together and discussing things that you don't understand with each other and trying to understand, and not making topics taboo, not making topics off, you can't touch these topics, talking about these things so that we can all come to better understandings to understand one another better. That's the solution, not the segregation that's going on. Again, we're resegregating, we're coming into our own tribes, we're breaking off into our own groups. That is a recipe for disaster. I was talking to my father the other day. My mother and father divorced when I was very young, and my father remarried. My stepmother was black, and I have a stepbrother in that marriage as well. And I remember as a kid, he was a much darker skinned black youth, and I was always fascinated as a child why the palms of his hands were so light. And why are the palms of your hands light, but the rest of your skin is dark, And people would look at that today as an offensive question. I was a child just trying to understand what I saw. He took no offense to it, and he knew there was no offense meant by it. But today, you ask a question like that, oh, don't ask such a thing. Well, how do you understand it? It's melanin. It's just the way people are. There's no difference there. But that certainly helped me being in those relationships back in the 70s, when interracial relationships certainly were not as accepted as they are today. And as I said, I'm interracial. My wife is from the Philippines, so she's Asian. I'm Swedish, German, Russian, and Irish is my combination, and she's pure Filipina. And which is really more Chinese and Spanish and a little bit of the Pacific Islander there. But anyway, that being said, inclusion and discussion, intelligent, respectful discussion in all aspects of life. That is the solution, and that is what this ministry is about. That we will talk about these tough subjects. We will talk about race. We'll talk about politics. We'll talk about the gay and lesbian and transgendered community and the issues there. But we'll do so in a respectful way. It does not mean that you will agree with my viewpoints, and that's fine. I appreciate that. Matter of fact, share in a respectful way your disagreement. Help me try to understand a viewpoint I may have missed. And the reality of it is, when you have these discussions, and as we talk about God and our paths to God, there is no one right or wrong way to approach these things. There's many different ways. All of them work. But the common goal should always be to find a common goal, to find the common ground, to find the middle place where we can all accept one another and understand that there may be areas that you agree to disagree, and that's okay. Doesn't make us enemies. And it just makes us family, and all family has things they disagree with. The fifth core goal is to help you always understand that it's okay to not be perfect. We're all faulted. We all make mistakes. And even good people sometimes do things they shouldn't do. And this is okay. I think one of the things that chases so many people away from the pursuit of God, again, is this idea that you have to be perfect. You have a set of rules that you must never sway from. And if you do sway from these things, there will be punishment. And, I have one of my recent blog posts that I put up when we get into this fairly in depth there, and I don't want to steal my thunder on that one, but the reality of it is God's a parent, right? Just like your mother, your father, whoever, your grandparents, whoever raised you, and they love you. Will you sometimes make them angry? Of course. Will you sometimes do things that they feel the need to punish you for? Of course. But any loving parent, a punishment is not done out of vengeance. It's not done out of anger. It's done to help teach you to not do something that's harmful to yourself, to teach you the proper way to do something, to point you in a different direction. And there's a purpose to that punishment, but that purpose is not to harm you. That purpose is to make you a better person and teach you to think better. And that's how my God is. That is the God of Live Positive Ministries. That is the God that we want you to get onto the path of. And that is the God that is a parent, that loves you, that understands you're going to make mistakes, will sometimes give you a little slap on the back end to kind of wake you up, to point you in the right direction, and hopefully get you to make the conscious decision to, instead of saying, when something challenging happens in your life, instead of saying, God, why did you do this to me? God, why are you so mean? Why is this horrible thing happening to me? And instead look and say, okay, what is the lesson that I am supposed to be learning here? This happened. It happened for a reason. Is there something I need to change? Is there a different approach I need to take? What is the reason? And look within yourself to fix yourself, to fix your situation, to have the power and control within your own life, to rely upon yourself to make things better. Because that's what every parent wants for their child. They want to teach them to make good choices, good decisions. They want to teach them to be a good person and a better person that helps this world. That's what a good parent does. That's what a loving parent does. So my God, our God, the God I hope you can find one day, if you haven't already, or if you have found God, I hope that your God is this loving God, right? Because nobody wants an abusive parent. And I think that's something we run into very often in most organized religion. There's aspects of that. And I think that forces a lot of people to look away from God. And we don't want that. So in my next blog that we're going to put out there, we're going to kind of get into more in depth about what is religion, what is the nature of God. It's kind of going to go over a little bit more of some of the things we've already gone over today, but in a little more depth. And then in the end, as we're going to wrap this one up, because we're at 30 minutes, I got a little bit more I want to go in here. I want to give you a little more of a introduction into who I am. Just a little background, brief snapshot of who I am and what brought me here today, and make you understand that we all have our challenges in life. I certainly did not have an easy life, but that's okay. Everything that happened to me in my life as a child and in my early adult days led me to where I am today, and I have no regrets. Where I am today, I'm very, very happy with. So, like I said, my name's Pastor Jason. I'm 52 years old. I'm married. I have 2 children. I have 2 grandchildren. And like many of you, I lived a life with challenges and difficulties, and through those times, I grew to become the person I am today, and I've seen an evolution of my beliefs through life's experiences, and through regular prayer and self-reflection. I have not always been a minister. I lived much of my adult life working restaurant management jobs, retail management jobs, security jobs, putting in 80-hour work weeks plus. Uh, I also lived a pretty crazy life in times. I found I was brought up in the church. I was brought up in the Lutheran faith. I was brought up in a very godly family. Um, but then as I struck out on my own in life at a fairly young age, um, I fell into a lot of things. I did a lot of stuff. I did a lot of the things that you certainly would not want your child to do. And I walked away from God for a good chunk of my life before rediscovering Him at the very important juncture within my life. And then after I retired from my company, I retired young at the age of 49, and then went on to found this ministry, become ordained, and here we are today. But I was, like I said, raised in a very strict Lutheran family. Our beliefs were strong and very traditional. I'm proud of that upbringing and always will be, because those beliefs gave me a strong foundation on which to build my family and which to build my home, solid ground that enabled me to and my family to survive, challenges. My parents divorced when I was, I believe, 4 years old. My memory isn't so good on those things. My father, until recently, really was not a part of my life. Matter of fact, he just came back into my life after 48 years of not knowing each other. But that's, perhaps a story for another day. I was raised by an amazing single mom. We were very poor. We had nothing. She was an artist. We survived selling her arts and crafts to people. And she was a kind, sweet, loving soul that would literally give you the shirt off her back. She would give you anything. Even though she had nothing, if you came to her and said you were hungry, she'd sacrifice her food so that you could eat. It was just the kind of person that she was. And the world treated her very poorly. She had a lot of not so good men come in and out of her life. She remarried. We had a stepfather who, once my mother was diagnosed with cancer, became both physically and emotionally abusive to her. And eventually the physical abuse fell upon my brother and I. And when that happened, she immediately left him. She was willing to take the abuse herself, but she certainly was not going to allow that abuse to be given to her children. And shortly after that, she was cancer got the best of her. She had a double mastectomy. She survived for a while. We moved down to Florida so she could go to the Moffitt Cancer Center. She fought the good fight, but when I was 12 years old, she finally she went to the hospital April 9th, which is my birthday, on my 12th birthday, and she died a few months later. And my brother and I, we moved to New Jersey to live with an aunt and uncle. My mom had 6 sisters, so that made a lot of aunts and uncles, and we had our aunt and uncle in New Jersey who we moved out to. My brother went to college, finished college, but then at the age of 17, I moved out on my own, and I lived in the attic of a row house in downtown Trenton, New Jersey, and Morris Avenue. Worked 80 hours a week, survived on ramen noodles and 3-liter bottles of soda that I got from Acme, which is a grocery store chain in New Jersey. My landlady had 32 cats and a Doberman named Dana that would attack you if you made eye contact with her. And I often, between finishing up school, working late at night, I would get home very, very late in the dark, and you'd open that front door and you'd hear Dana in the dark going, "Arr!" And you just prayed you didn't look in her direction, because you just didn't want your leg getting chewed on in the middle of the night as you're trying to get up and go to bed after a crazy long day and crazy long week. So it was an interesting time for me. And I eventually did give into the wilder side of life. I got to the point where I drank very heavily, smoked a lot of weed, spent a lot of time just pissed off at life in general, pissed off at the world, and, pissed off at God. My life just wasn't good. I was very alone. I was just had a big empty space, and I was struggling to survive. It just wasn't a good time. And, I did a lot of jobs. I managed Domino's Pizza. I managed a shoe department in James Way department stores. So I did a lot of security work. Barely made a living, the typical paycheck to paycheck life. And I also had little to no contact with my family. I was kind of the black sheep of the family. And, life was just lonely. But I get into a little bit more on the blog, but I did have a time where I certainly considered taking my own life. And but right during that time, I had a moment of real clarity that my life was at rock bottom. It couldn't get any worse. And a huge weight was lifted from my shoulders because I realized I could do anything. I could try anything. I could take any chance. And I couldn't make things worse than they already were. And that's when my life really turned around. I actually had my first conversation with God that night in many, many years since my mom had died. And God led me back on a path. And I've been on that path ever since. Shortly after all that craziness happened, I met my first wife. And our relationship in and of itself to me proves that there's a God in the sense that we're two people that should never have been together. Never have, should have. As a matter of fact, I had gotten an apartment with a friend of mine, a roommate, and we were having a housewarming party. And I had invited this girl, Debbie, who I really was interested in. And she brought who ended up being my wife with her. And that's how I met her at this party. She never left. I proposed to her the night I met her. And we married a couple weeks later. And we had 2 children. We stayed married for 9 years. We had 2 children. She had multiple affairs. And eventually she up and left, went to another state. She ran off with, interestingly enough, a guy who worked for Domino's Pizza. And they moved to Colorado. And she left her children and myself back here. And I raised our children on my own for most of their lives. But our purpose to get together was to make these children, who are 2 amazing, wonderful children. My daughter's got 2 bachelor's degrees, 2 children, married, has a very successful career. My son is in the military and is having a very successful military career and has got his college degree. And, both successful, wonderful children. And so I have no regrets, 0 regrets. And she helped bring me out of that dark period of my life. It brought me into, now I'm a married man, and then I'm a father. And, these are the times I need to take seriously. And I stopped with all that crazy partying, wild life at that time and started taking life seriously at that point. So everything that happens for a reason. And divorce was painful and all that was not good. And raising 2 children completely on my own was very, very difficult. My kids are 4 and 6 years old when their mother left, and my son had a disability, and he went to one school in one city. My daughter went to another school in another city, and I was working my career that required me to travel to yet another city. And so it was a matter of getting 2 kids to 2 different schools on time every day, getting to work, then getting back from work and picking those 2 kids up from 2 different schools in 2 different towns and 2 different daycares and aftercare programs to get them back home and get them fed and taken care of. And when they were sick, I had nobody that could help me with going and get them. So there was a lot of challenges, and you had to make these things work. It wasn't easy, but it worked, and it all worked out. It was a challenge in life. It was a challenge in life that taught me how to be a better father, taught me how to organize my time better, and taught me to understand that, sure, life can be difficult sometimes, but as long as you keep your head together, you can find ways to make things work. But anyway, that's a little bit of background about me. So yes, I'm now remarried. I met my wife in Cebu in the Philippines. We've been together 4 years, been married 2 years now, and she is the single most amazing human being I've ever met in my life. And I would recommend, I hope to get her on here one day, that we're going to talk a little bit more about the Philippines. I would highly recommend anybody to visit the Philippines. The people there are some of the most loving, respectful, kind, nice people that you will ever meet in your entire existence. Yeah, they're just amazing, amazing people. And I would highly, as this pandemic is ending and as the borders are opening up and travel's coming back, I cannot recommend more highly a place to go and treat these people with respect and show them a little bit of love, because the people of the Philippines are just absolutely amazing people. But anyway, that's it for today. We're at 45 minutes into this podcast, into our introductory inaugural podcast of Live Positive Ministries. I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me anytime at livepositiveministries@gmail.com. You're always free to question, discuss, ask about anything that was discussed in any particular podcast. Please refer to whichever podcast it is, or if it was episode 1, 2, whatever. Or if there's a subject you have a question about that you would like my opinion on, or a thought or a theory or what have you that you would like to hear my opinions on, please ask me at livepositiveministries@gmail.com. But again, I'm Pastor Jason. I look forward to a relationship with each and every one of you. And I'm always going to ask you one thing, and that is, no matter what path to God you choose, please take that first step and take that journey to find your Creator, find your meaning, find your purpose, and to always live positive. That's it for today. Thank you. God bless, and be safe.